So good afternoon everyone. I am Katrina Paula B. Villamor, and today I will discuss you about the components of language. So there are 5 components of language: the phonology, morphology, syntax, semantics, and pragmatics. Phonology. Phonology refers to the sound system of language. A phoneme is the smallest unit of sound within a language. Morphology. Morphology of a language refers to the smallest unit of language that has meaning and which are used to combine words. Sounds, syllables, or whole words are examples of morphemes. Syntax. Syntax is the system of rules governing the meaningful arrangement of words, which also include grammar rules. For instance, the sentence, "Ready get for the exam" does not make sense until arranged in the right sequence as "get ready for the exam." Semantics. Semantics refers to the meanings associated with the words and combination of words in a language. This also includes vocabulary, concept development, connotative meanings of words, and categories. Pragmatics. Pragmatics revolves around the social use of language, knowing what, when, and how to communicate and use language in specific contexts. There are 3 kinds of pragmatic skills. Number 1 is using language for different purposes. Example of this is narrating, explaining, or questing. Number 2, changing language according to the context. Example, talking to a peer as compared to speaking to a well-respected professor. Last, following rules for conversations and storytelling. Example of this is taking turns, rephrasing when unclear, how to use facial expressions, and eye contact. Knowing these terms is necessary to understand the different disabilities that are associated with communication disorders, namely speech impairment and language disorders. So, what is speech impairments? Speech impairments are communication disorders such as stuttering, impaired articulation, and language or voice impairment. Such disorders are significant enough that they can adversely affect a student's academic performance. There are 4 basic types of speech impairments: articulation, phonological, fluency, and voice disorder. What is articulation disorder? Articulation disorder is a child is unable to produce a given sound physically. Severe articulation disorder may render a child's speech unintelligible. Examples are substitutions, omissions, distortions, and additions of speech sounds. Example of articulation disorder is I want a blue lollipop. I want a blue lollipop. Can I get 3 bananas? And I eat bananas. So, children with communication disorders frequently struggle across social settings, whether at home, school, or in other places in the community. Some of the difficulties that characterize communication disorders are expressive language difficulties and receptive language difficulties. So, expressive language difficulties are limited vocabulary, incorrect grammar or syntax, expressive repetition of information, difficulty in formulating questions, difficulty constructing sentences. So, that is the expressive language difficulty. And receptive language difficulties are following oral directions, understanding humor or figurative language, comprehending compound and complex sentences, responding to questions appropriately. Children with communication disorders may also experience behavioral difficulties because they struggle in expressing their needs and ideas. Some children resort to inappropriate behaviors out of frustrations or to get the attentions of significant others. For instance, a 5-year-old child with expressive language disorder may resort to grabbing toys and hitting his peers who try to take the toy he was playing with the day before. While typically developing children will be able to say, "May I please borrow?" or "It's my turn now." A child with communication difficulties may not be able to utter this accurately and instead resort to using actions resulting to physical aggression. Thus, it is essential that teachers and professionals take this into consideration when working with children with communication disorders and difficulties. Such feelings of frustrations may even become worse when pairs of adults are unable to understand them. Despite these language difficulties, children with communication disorders are known to have their own strengths and abilities. These can be best understood using the theory of multiple intelligence by Gardner, 1983, cited in Armstrong, 2012. As explained in Chapter 5, that shows the different strengths and abilities children have. In Gardner's theory, children may have abilities in different areas or domains, which makes it necessary for parents and teachers to provide opportunities for such strengths and abilities to be displayed. Children with communication disorders may have limitations in the linguistic interpersonal areas but may possess good spiritual, musical, and body kinesthetic abilities. In other words, a child may struggle with communication. As parents, teachers, practitioners, knowing a student's strength and highlighting such abilities in an inclusive classroom isn't important as knowing and understanding his or her communication disorder. Different strategies and accommodations may be used to provide level playing field for children with communication difficulties or disorders. This section discusses the use of Universal Design for Learning or UDL and practical tips to be used in the classroom. So, what is Universal Design for Learning? Use of UDL in the classroom allows children to learn information, demonstrate understanding, and stay engaged in multiple ways. Multiple means of presentation, expression, and engagement because of weakness resulting from communication difficulties or disorders. Teaching and learning practices as well as assessment should be presented in different modalities such as visual, auditory, and kinesthetic, motor, and tactile. This means that lessons are presented through various means, such as using pictures or videos and hands-on experiential learning, and not solely by passive approaches such as reading from textbooks, lectures, and teacher-directed discussions. Presenting learning activities in this manner gives children with communication difficulties or disorders the opportunity to use their strengths and stronger modalities to compensate for their weaknesses and a chance to be successful in an inclusive classroom. So, Practical tips for the classroom. In addition to using UDL, there are practical tips and techniques that teachers can use to provide students with communication difficulties to support they need in order to be successful. The following list provides practical suggestions that teachers can use in the classroom. These suggestions are best implemented in a classroom that promotes supportive and respectful culture, one that acknowledges and accepts diversity and allows accommodation for learners with difficulties. Number 1 tip is allow the child to sit near the teacher and the blackboard away from auditory and visual distractions such as the window and the door. 2. Get the child's attention before giving directions. Call the child's name to use or prearrange signal. To help child focus and listen to the directions. 3. Use pictures, charts, and other visual aids when explaining content to supplement auditory information. 4. Speak slowly and clearly without exaggerating speech. 5. Simplify directions into short steps. Break down multi-step directions and give each one at a time instead of just repeating each one. 6. Provide a written copy of directions for a task so the child can refer back to it at his or her own pace. 7. Use gestures to clarify information. 8. Use premeditated instruction so that peers without difficulties can serve as language models and learning buddies. 9. Provide extra time to prepare for oral language activities. Do not call children with communication difficulties or disorders to recite first in class. Call other typically developing children first to serve as language models. 10. Model correct language forms and use appropriate wait times, 3 to 5 seconds or more, to give the child time to think and respond. And lastly, explicitly teach vocabulary that is needed in the learning context to promote better comprehension. Universal design for learning alongside different accommodations, representation, response, setting, and timing that are appropriate to child and collaboration between the general education teacher and the special education professional will all help ensure that children with communication difficulties or disorders have a chance to be as successful in an inclusive classroom. And that's all for today. I hope you understand it well.